We are learning Daf Zayin of Brachos, top 10 teachings on Daf Zayin. The first teaching is, did you know that God prays, and how the prayer of Yishmael ben Elisha became a Avraham Fried hit. So the Gemara tells us that we learn out that God prays, and it brings a proof text for that. And what is his prayer? So the Gemara says, Yihi ratzon milfanai sheich v'shurachmi eskasi. May it be your will that may it be my will that my compassion overcomes my anger. V'yugolu rachmi al midosai, and my compassion should be more powerful than my other emotions, namely my emotions of retribution. And let me be kind and compassionate in the way I treat my children. And I'll go and judge them I'll go beyond the boundary of judgment, meaning I'll be giving them the benefit of the doubt. So the Gemara continues and says a parallel to that, which is a brisa, which is made famous by none other than Avraham Fried, who turned it into a song. Here's the song. I'm not going to do a great job of it, but here it goes. Amar Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. I'll translate it. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha said, Pamachas nichnasti. I'm so glad nobody's watching right now. Pamachas nichnasti lahaktir kitares lifnai velifnim. One time I went into the holy temple, into the Holy of Holies, to bring the ketoret, the burnt offerings. V'yisi Akasriel, Yashem Tzavos. I saw Akasriel, the holy master, the Lord of the hosts. Shuyayishev Hakisei Yom V'nisa. He was sitting on a mighty tall throne. And he said to me, Yishmael b'ni, oy b'ni, oy b'ni, oy b'ni. Yishmael b'ni, barcheni, Yishmael, my son, bless me. Amarti loy, yatzayin milfanecha. Shich v'shu yachamecha eskascha v'yigoylu yachamecha al midoisecha yachamecha al midoisecha. And I told him, may it be your will that your mercy conquer over your anger, and may your mercy overcome your stricter feelings. V'tisnai gimanecha b'midas haracha amim. Psichanes lahem lifnim mishur asadin. V'tichanes lahem lifnim mishur asadin. Di-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dam. Di-da-da-da-da-da-dam. What is going on here? This is a wild, wild song, which is actually a section of the Talmud. First of all, what is this name of God? Most of you have never heard it outside of the Avraham Fried song. Akasriel Yud Hey Hashem Tzvakot. That's the Akasriel sounds like an angel. Usually Gavriel, Michael, they all end with the two letters Aleph Lamed, which is one of God's name. But most people suggest that it's talking about God, but an aspect of God which is associated with Keser Elyon, with God's crown, let's talk for a moment about this idea of God being angry and us blessing him not to get angry. His own prayer is to suppress his own anger and to have his compassion overcome his sternness. And we also bless him likewise. Sounds like an interesting relationship where, like, imagine you're out with your wife and it's your wife's birthday and it's time for, your wife says, well, why don't you, it's my special day, why don't you give me a blessing on my birthday? And you say, honey, my blessing for you is every time you really get angry, remember to stay calm. Every time you really get mad, remember to just chill out. Remember to bring it down. Remember to be more kind than mad. Remember to be more nice than upset. Oh, whoa, this is an interesting dynamic. This is an interesting relationship here. Let's see what we have. Flip the screen. Okay. So that's the question. Why are we praying for this type of God to not be angry? And the answer is very simple. It goes back to Rosh Hashanah, to the beginning of the year. On Rosh Hashanah, we say that God is sitting on his throne of judgment, and our goal is to get God to get up from the throne of judgment and to sit on the seat of compassion. And that's the purpose of the blowing of the shofar, is to affect kind of a dynamic, a shift, so to speak, in God's anger, from the anger to compassion. Now, let me explain to you something. In a relationship, anger signifies that you care. So if you love somebody very much and they just, don't reciprocate and you don't get angry about it, question is, how deep is your love? And God's love is so deep that there's a well of negative emotions that go along with that love, such as jealousy. And we have a very jealous God who doesn't like it when we cozy up to other gods, or when we don't live up to our commitments and when we don't live up to our potential. And God, so to speak, metaphorically, again, all these things are metaphors, anthropomorphic, but we're going to get into what they mean, so to speak, gets angry. So that is the prayer that both God prays to not get angry, to have his compassion overcome his rage, and the blessing of Yishmael, the priest, that the Kohen Gadol, that God should suppress his anger through his compassion. This is a very powerful foundational idea, which is that when we pray, these two prayers are almost identical. Just one of them is God praying, and one of them is Yishmael praying or blessing God with identical words, just changing whether it's going on God himself or us blessing God. So what that means is that's a very solid principle, that what we do below affects God above. That's a foundation in the Zohar, a foundation in Kabbalah, but it seems from this Gemara that it's also important in the Talmud as well. As a number of great rabbis have put it, there is nothing in the Zohar that's not in the Talmud. Well, we can test out that theory later, but this would be one proof for something common in Kabbalah, in the Zohar, to be in the Talmud as well. In fact, many people would probably guess that would be a big difference between Hasidim and Misnagdim. Hasidim believe that they can create change in God. That's what the tzaddik's job is. And the Misnagdim probably think God is unchanging, kind of the way Maimonides describes him as not changing at all. But they'd be wrong if they made that assumption, because the greatest pupil of the Vilna Gaon wrote a book called the Nefesh HaChaim, and in it, although he disputes certain doctrines of Hasidism, he makes clear that this particular belief is part of Torah. This idea, as Ishi, what is the verse that says that God says that the offering, the sacrifice is my bread. I am satisfied by it. That principle, that's a principle of Kabbalah, and also this Gemara, is that God, so to speak, enjoys. He doesn't have to physically need an offering, but he enjoys the idea of our relationship with us, and he reciprocates it in kind. So therefore, that is a core teaching of Kabbalah that we see in today's page of Talmud on Daf Zayin, Amud Aleph. That's number one. Number two is the Gemara says, we learn out from this that the blessing of a simple person shouldn't be light or unimportant in your eyes. What does that mean? First of all, usually we love the esteem of our equals or even those who are superior to us. We seek their approval, but lesser people in our own minds, they don't carry the same weightiness. But guess what? One of the most beautiful things that we learn is that although that's part of the human condition, God is not like that. God specifically is happy to hear from even the poor and the destitute, because the truth is there's no one who can get close to God in terms of being as amazing and infinite and holy. So therefore, it's not so much about being equal to God as much as trying to be in a relationship. It doesn't matter how insignificant you are in comparison. God chooses to make that relationship meaningful. And we have to be godlike also, and it doesn't matter how seemingly unimportant the person is, unaccomplished, unlearned, we should take them seriously the way God does and take their blessing seriously. And the truth is, it really happens in real life when a blessing is actually not just a mystical concept, it is that as well, but it's simply sometimes somebody bringing out something in you. So you could be speaking to a stranger, they could say something nice about you, and you're like, oh, great, and it kind of lifts you up or directs you or helps you go in a specific way. So don't underestimate even somebody you don't really know or feel that highly about, the impact they can have, the positive things they can have on you. That's number two. Number three is God's anger management. We talked a little bit about God and anger. The Gemara has a protracted conversation about God's anger. So, for example, it says that a bunch of different things about God's anger. One thing is not to try to appease God in the moment of the flash of his anger. The same thing with other people. Like if you see a person gets really upset, don't use that moment to try to calm them down. Wait till that heat subsides. Another concept is that God gets angry for a moment every day, and a moment is not even a millisecond in the Talmud. Why is that bad for us? Since it's just for a tiny bit, is that if God forbid somebody could manipulate God at that moment and fan the flame of his anger, we'd be in trouble. That was understood to be the power that Bilam, who was a prophet, had. He wasn't considered, in this section of the Talmud, he wasn't considered particularly accomplished other than the fact that he could figure out the moment of God's anger and manipulate it to hurt us. Other sources, such as the Zohar and other places, do talk about Bilam as being equal to Moses in prophecy. So it's a good question about whether this section of the Talmud could be reconciled with that. It may or may not be. That's a little bit about God's anger. The commentaries talk about a little bit to understand deeper what this anger is, and two notes on that. The Sefer HaChinuch tells us that not to take this literally. Of course, God isn't just like a upset person whose feelings are hurt and gets angry on a literal level. Rather, the way we should understand it is that the world, the Talmud tells us, is always in balance between good and bad, and rejuvenation and destruction. And if, God forbid, the world tips heavily in the direction of bad, the whole world is in jeopardy. And therefore, the moment of God's anger, according to the Sefer Chinuch, is when the world seems to be tipping, when one bad person does the act that could metaphorically be the straw that on the camel's back that just makes the camel collapse. And then God's compassion kind of kicks in slowly, and God calms down, so to speak, doesn't destroy the world. The other way of looking at it is that moment of kind of missed opportunity of what the world could be like. So sometimes when the world is a messy place, as we've seen, it's been the last few weeks, it's often a messy place. There's anger because of the messiness in it. And more than messiness, even evil, outright evil that's in it. Okay, so that's number 2. We're going to go on to number 3. No, that was number 3, God's anger management. Number 4 is, what was Moses asking when he wanted to see God's face? It says, Hodiyeni na'as darchecha, right? One of the things he says, it's in the 33rd chapter of Exodus, of Shimmush. So there's a whole conversation after the Jews sin and worship the golden calf, and God, they've pushed God's buttons a little bit more than usual, and God is had it with them. But Moses rallies and makes a comeback, and he prays for a number of things. And it says he's praying for 3 things, and there's a debate in the Talmud if the third thing was answered. What's the third thing? God says, let me know your ways. So what is he asking? And there's another verse that says, let me see your face. And God answers him, I'll let you see my back, but I won't let you see my face. Ki lo yirani adam achai, because a person can't see my face and live. So therefore, we have to understand, what is it that Moses was really asking for, other than the simple meaning is he wanted to see God's face. He wanted to see the most inner part of God that was, what God sees in himself, so to speak. So, here's where it's going to get very interesting, because we're going to do some Ishbitz Torah, and Ishbitz is awesome. Actually, let's work our way up to the Ishbitz. So what Moshe was asking God is the question of, why do good people suffer? The way the Talmud phrases that is tzaddik, a righteous person, viralo, and bad things happen to him. And the same question would be, why do wicked people prosper? Rasha vitovlo. That's a very good question. A lot of people are still bothered. In fact, you go into a lot of Barnes and Noble and something Harris and something whatever, the latest best-selling atheist. They figured out, they're geniuses, because they figured out this thing that how could there be a God where bad things happen? And it's so amazing that they figured this out, because nobody's ever thought about that, because if they had, they certainly wouldn't be believing in God. Well, guess what? That's like one of the oldest questions out there. We know it's a question. It's a great question. So thank you for, again, bringing it up, that it's a great question. As if you discover what big Einsteins over there, all their questions are like, I haven't seen one atheist ask a question that wasn't already talked about in the Torah and addressed, not answered in the simplistic way, but at least addressed, even acknowledged to not necessarily have an answer. Guess what? This is one of them. This is one of them. According to one opinion, God started giving Moses answers, but the other opinion is God said, listen, I can't let you know that. That's one of the secrets that I can't let you know. So what's the reason that we can't know that? And that's going to take us into number 5, which is when God said, you can't see my face, but you can see my back. According to the Gemara, God showed him the knot of his teffilen. What does that mean, the knot of his tefillin? So we learned yesterday that tefillin means the idea, the concept of God designating us as a unique people in the world to recognize our mission and our calling and our service to Him. So what is the what is the difference between the back of the tefillin and the front of the tefillin? So here's where the Mea Shilach, the Ishbitzer, comes in and says something very, truly amazing. He says, the front of the tefillin represent how we're constantly connected to God, no matter what it is we do. So it's almost like how somebody who looks like they're doing something wrong is not necessarily doing something wrong. It looks like it on the outside, but on the inside, it's almost like the opposite of like when we talk about a tzaddik v'ralo. One of the ways of understanding it is, well, it looks like the tzaddik is suffering, but really he isn't suffering because God has something better in store for him. Either he's acquiring a real estate in the world to come, metaphorically, not actually. So here's what the Mea Shilach says. The kesher shel tefillin, the knot of the tefillin, represents the 2020 vision in hindsight, that God told Moses, I will show you after the fact that what happens, of how people are still connected to God, even though at the time that they did what they did, it didn't look like they were connected to God. It looked like they were disconnected. What is the front of the tefillin? The front of the tefillin is the level that Rabbi Akiva was able to connect to, which is what? There's a very amazing Gemara where Rabbi Akiva says, if I had lived in the time of the Sanhedrin, during the temple period, I would have made sure that they never would have executed somebody with the Daled Misas Beistin, with any of the 4 types of death penalties that are prescribed by the Torah. And the Gemara and the Rashi and the Tosas talk about how he would have gotten away with that, what he would have done to take away what's clearly written in the Torah. Let's talk about the philosophy behind it. He was a liberal. Rabbi Akiva was a liberal. Why was he a liberal? Because he believed that if you look deeply enough into anyone's actions, you would see that what they were doing couldn't truly be evil. He would somehow find the merit in it. He would find a way that it was part of God's plan in the moment. That's why even when Rabbi Akiva was suffering, he was in love with God. There was no discrepancy between what he experienced and what he believed, even though the rest of us think that's crazy. But Rabbi Akiva saw it in living. He saw God in the present. He saw what even Moses couldn't see. And that's why Rabbi Akiva is the foundation of the oral Torah, and the principle of the oral Torah, which is in the written Torah but expounded in by Rabbi Akiva as V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Okay, that's number 5. Number 6 is on Daf Zayin Amid Beis, and that's about Leah was the first person to do Thanksgiving. Why is that? Because when she had Yehuda, she said, now, what was it? She said, now I can acknowledge and be grateful to God. The verse goes like this. V'tar od v'teled ben v'tomer hapam odes Hashem al kein kar shmo Yehuda. She said she had another child and had a right. She said, now I can acknowledge or be grateful to God. And she called him Yehuda. What is the power of acknowledging and thanking? So in Chassidus and in Kabbalah, they explain it's not simply a thank you. You know, when a waiter in a restaurant brings me the bowl of soup, I say thank you. But what if somebody brought me the bowl of soup that I literally was about to die, and they saved my life with a bowl of soup because it's in the desert and there's nobody and nothing, and somebody came to rescue me and gave me a bowl of soup. It's a little more than thank you. Then it's like, you saved my life, thank you. So when we acknowledge and we're grateful to the Ribono Shel Olam, to God, for giving us our life, it's more than just thank you for a bowl of soup. It's thank you for life itself. And what that does is it gives oneself over to divine service in a very powerful way. Okay, now we come to number 7. This is a very hard one. This is a very, very hard one. This is, how do you treat your firstborn? Do you treat your firstborn special? Do you try to give them leadership roles within the family? Or do you just treat all of your children equally? And there are reasons to go in either direction. The reason, for example, to treat all your children equally is we recently read that Joseph's brothers hated him. They hated him because of the gift of the coat of many colors and because of his dreams. And the Talmud points out because of a gift of a fancy coat, that caused his brothers to hate him. So we should try to not have a standout relationship in terms of how we treat a particular child, to treat them better than the others, give them things differently than the others, because you're going to create animosity. So that Talmudic dictum would try to argue for equality, egalitarianism in how you treat your children. Okay? However, we do find that there is a concept of the birthright, right? The firstborn gets the pi shnayim, gets a double portion in certain things, not everything. We'll have a shiur on that when we get to that in the Talmud as well. And there are ways of undoing that as well, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But the idea is there. So let's think for a moment. What happened in the story with Joseph is that his father considered Joseph to be his firstborn son because he never really loved Leah that much. He only loved Rachel. He married Leah by accident. He didn't realize he was marrying Leah. So therefore, he never really gave Reuven, the firstborn, any real kind of sense of like, you're my firstborn son. I really love you. You're special. He only did that to Joseph. So what ends up happening is Reuven does something bad with one of the wives, one of the concubines of Jacob. Rabbis say he didn't literally sleep with her, he just messed up her bed. But whatever he did was very disrespectful to his father. And then his father demoted him and made him insignificant compared to Joseph. The problem with that narrative is that, to begin with, before that happened, we see pretty clearly in the Torah that Jacob already favored Joseph. And the problem with that is that when you don't give the firstborn that respect, it creates an imbalance in the family dynamic. So this is just something to be continued, something to think about, which is, if the Torah saw the need to give the firstborn son a double portion, does that mean the Torah recognizes the concept of leadership within the children? And that's just something to think about. I'm not weighing in conclusively one way or another. I just brought two perspectives on it and speak to somebody very wise to know how to implement the right relationship with the birth order of your children and so on. If you just treat them equally, obviously each child is different and needs to be treated for who they are. But then again, this is an interesting insight. And it's brought out by the Talmud, the difference between the way Leah accepted the fact that Reuven was ultimately demoted. She didn't complain about it. The problem is that she may have accepted it, but it didn't seem like her children did. So the Talmud doesn't really address that here, but we know it's addressed elsewhere. Esav, on the other hand, who sold his firstborn rights, still protested. So the Gemara makes that point to praise Leah even more. So that was number 7. Number 8 is starting up with evil people. The problem with starting up with evil people is, on the one hand, they're bad. You're trying to get them to not be bad, trying to stop them from hurting others. On the other hand, once you become the judge, there's a fear that you might be overly zealous and who's evil, who's bad. That's one issue. The other issue is you might become like them. And the third issue is you may not succeed. They may outwit you or do things against you to harm you. And the Gemara describes a number of situations and when and how and if ever it's okay to kind of instigate a fight with evil people. One of the things is sometimes somebody's on a roll, and even if they're bad, they have luck. So keep away from them. Don't start up with them at that point. Anyway, that's number 8. Number 9 is very important. The Gemara tells us that serving a Torah scholar is greater than studying with him. But part of the reason for that is that it's spending time with the Torah scholar gives you access to what they actually do, how they treat other people, and how they apply the law in real time, not just theoretically in book learning. And in order to become a leader, you need to have that element of Torah as embodied in a person, not just in studying. That's number 9. And number 10 is the concept of praying. There's an idea of a time of prayer. We know that the Talmud spends a lot of time talking about what the correct time for prayer is. But there's another idea that if you can't go to a Minyan, if you could find out when approximately they get to the Shemona Esrei and pray with them, that connects you to the group energy that's so important in the Minyan. And even if you're not actually part of the Minyan physically because you can't be there, but that time also creates kind of an opening. Hope you enjoyed watching, and thank you.